Today we're talking to three very interesting gentlemen in the crypto industry. Andrej and Niklas, who founded Bitcoin Suisse back in 2013, together with Fabian, when Bitcoin's price stood at around about $100. Also, we're going to talk to Dr. Vayloyan, who is now the CEO of Bitcoin Suisse. He operated in the financial industry for more than 2 decades prior to serving as a CEO. Maybe how about you introducing yourself to the viewers?
It's the two gentlemen look at me.
Yes.
My name is Andrej Majcen. As you correctly mentioned, I'm a co-founder of Bitcoin Suisse, and I'm currently heading the client service department basically with institutional, high net worth, family office, EAM, and private/retail department. My background is primarily from finance economics, coming directly more or less from the university when we started this venture almost 8 years ago. Thank you.
And my name is Niklas Nikolajsen, founder of Bitcoin Suisse, currently serves as the chairman of Bitcoin Suisse. And I had a background before I moved to Switzerland specifically to found this company in the computer science. I worked 15 years as a software architect. But fates change.
My name is Arthur Vayloyan. I spent, as you said, 20 years in the financial industry, in the, let's say, classical financial industries, but was always curious to discover opportunities, new things. As such, for example, microfinance was one of my topics. I was quite involved. And later I had a break, and that break gave me where I had a few years to do other things. I had the privilege to discover Bitcoin, and with Bitcoin, Bitcoin Suisse. Living in Zug, that is not a total surprise. And coming back to a classical private bank, I ventured into making possible that a classical bank could offer direct investments. And we managed to do so back in July 2017 as the first offering directly together with Bitcoin Suisse.
Okay. So maybe to kick it off, the crypto markets had quite a massive rise last year, and now kind of dumped back from their highs. Maybe, Andrej, what was your experience in the past month? What did you see trends from clients coming in? So,
it's an interesting question. It's a little bit of deja vu, back to the years in 17-18, when there was quite a strong hype in the crypto markets, when a lot of retail investors and interest actually came into the market. And like back in the days, we a couple of months ago were still again struggling to onboard new clients, because it was quite difficult to scale the operational setup of the firm in the same let's say capacity as the crypto markets went up. So this was definitely a challenge. We hired a lot of new employees. We were implementing new systems in order to keep up basically with the demand from the market. So that was definitely an experience we already had a couple of years ago, but where we promised to not go into this again. We already scaled quite significantly in the last years, but now we've seen again when the crypto markets took up that this is definitely a challenge for the operational setup. When it comes to, let's say, tokens, while of course Bitcoin was a heavy driver last year, particularly, with also quite let's say a high percentage of the total market cap of cryptocurrencies. It was the main driver, and then with the launch of Ethereum 2 staking at the end of last year, November, December, there was of course also quite an interest then coming up in Ether particularly, but then also the altcoin market, where a lot of the tokens benefited a lot that already had some kind of a legacy, especially coming from the ICO days. The ones that survived were of course quite interesting because they had a track record, and also they survived, let's say, the crypto winter days, which were of course also quite good cards for them to take up again in this new kind of demand now. Yeah.
But it's not only, 17 the driver was clearly retail, and while it might still be, we're also seeing bigger clients, right?
Absolutely.
Also from the financial sector and from the investment sector.
Absolutely. So this is also a game changer, of course. While the demand, as you mentioned, were mainly retails, and the demand was of course not that high during the crypto winter days. It was not that hypey to be in crypto or talk about it, but a lot happened still in those crypto winter days. I mean, we as a firm significantly actually beefed up. We hired a lot of more people. We implemented new systems also at that time. We doubled, tripled the operational setup in those years, and so did many other firms, at least the ones that survived, but also coming in from the traditional financial sector, because they did a lot of homework preparation, they did due diligence, they tried to understand cryptocurrencies in particularly better, to be ready whenever the markets go up again. And this is what we're seeing now, and that's also of course a driver for the institutional demand now, because it didn't came from one day to another. It had a lot of pre-work behind it, and of course a lot of due diligence as well.
And where do you see this institutional demand going? So where is the money flowing into? Mainly Bitcoin or also altcoins?
It's a mix, but Bitcoin is for sure the main let's say target, because when institutional clients go into cryptos, they primarily go into something that is liquid, that is easily available, that has been around, where the infrastructure is also available, be it on the brokerage side, on the custody side as well. And Bitcoin fulfills all of that. And of course Ethereum belongs probably to every portfolio, and then it already goes into the more exotic tokens, but also there everything that is related to staking chains is quite interesting as well. So after having a certain kind of, let's say, a footprint or experience with Bitcoin and Ethereum, institutional investors also look into passive income, for example, from staking. So this is also quite something that has been taking up a lot in the last couple of months. Yeah.
Maybe a question for you, Niklas, about these altcoins. In the past 5 years, the number of new coins has risen dramatically. And so we're now at around about 7,000 coins, I think. And so with all these ideas and new protocols, do you see potential in some of them, or is a lot of it just pure speculation?
I don't think there's thousands of and thousands of independent blockchains, but there's certainly thousands and thousands of tokens, of which many of them are actually launched on other platforms. So there are not that many blockchain use cases for tokens per se, and it's probably unrealistic to say that many of these 7,000 mentioned tokens that do not represent something in the real world, like tokenized whatever, have a future. So Bitcoin has taken the role as the most transparent, most decentralized, most conservative, most easy to understand store of value in the crypto space. Ethereum as the dominating smart contract platform. And then there's maybe, I would say, less than 10 other projects that one should look into that are more looking into other use cases. Faster on-chain transaction speed with some trade-off is one. Some do governance on the blockchain, that is another. Some promise to be better Ethereums, or execute smart contracts better than Ethereum. But I would be very cautious to look into the super exotic space, and especially probably try to avoid the so-called Bitcoin killer or Ethereum killer apps, because with all likelihood the next Bitcoin is going to be Bitcoin. I mean, Bitcoin is not only a function of the technology, but also of adaptation. So I mean, you can copy Bitcoin easily. And that's what many of those thousands of coins you mentioned have done. They are Litecoin copies, they are Bitcoin copies, there are in some cases also Ethereum copies. You can copy that, but then you will be on a standalone platform. It's not much different than if I took a piece of paper and wrote, this is Niklas francs, 100 Niklas francs, and that doesn't make it necessarily money. You need on the smart contract platforms to have people building the software on your platform. This is what we saw with Windows triumphing over OS2 as the predominant operating system, because Windows brought the applications, and OS2 was the better system maybe, but it doesn't matter. I don't want to mention the 8 or between 8 and 12 things that I hold personally and that I think has a future, because then I would be attacked by number 13 or 14 or 15 for not mentioning them. But I would say that there is no great future for thousands of blockchain. There's a future for, let's say, between 10 and 15 blockchains that have different use cases. And the topic is to identify those.
Yep.
They will have extra high value gain. But I would be very, very careful about many of these exotic things that are out there for an investment view.
And so you mentioned Ethereum.
Mhm.
How likely is it that Ethereum is going to take over Bitcoin in its significance?
Well, in some sense, it has done so long ago, in that it is a much better platform for building decentralized application than Bitcoin will likely ever be. And that's smart contract development is key to future decentralized financial and non-financial applications. So that significance is very big. However, if you're talking market cap, I personally do not foresee Ethereum, at least not within the next half decade, to threaten Bitcoin on that aspect. Because to be a very good application platform is a little bit contrary to being solid and predictable money. It requires, so you have to do a trade-off sometimes between security and flexibility. And a smart contract platform has to be very flexible, but that also introduces risk in terms of the software protocol per se. And you do not get $1 trillion that you do not put at risk, right? I mean, that just has to be absolutely predictable, and I think Bitcoin can do that better than other platforms. But Ethereum is certainly a very important platform, and so are some of these other platforms in this group of 10 that I would probably recommend investors to look at.
And so what's Bitcoin Suisse role in this space? So where do you mentioned you want to become the Credit Suisse of the crypto industry, and so with all these new projects, where do you navigate? What's your vision at Bitcoin Suisse?
Probably I never said that, but in the
He was looking at me, I think.
that obviously in Bitcoin Suisse we carry the name Bitcoin. I think that's a statement which I really personally appreciate, because it's the mother of them all. It's the innovation, it's the coming together of so many fantastic technologies and made something new out of it, which in itself is just a wonder. And as such, it's good to have it in the name. And obviously the story is known that Niklas worked at for Credit Suisse back then, 2010, 11 I think it was, and as such proposed to Credit Suisse the project Bitcoin Suisse. For certain reasons they were not really jumping on it, and then you have to decide either you move or you'll be moving, and Niklas decided to move on with the idea, and from then on it started. And that was then August 2013, an extremely difficult moment to believe that this could be very big, although prices went up in that year dramatically. Just after the company has been founded, it went down. So 3 years of stamina, I would say, and perseverance. And that's the good thing about Bitcoin Suisse, that a few people, two of the gentlemen sit here, had the power to not give up, to see the opportunity, to also appreciate small adaptation steps in the midst of a lot of attacks where you could easily change board and say, oh, maybe I was wrong here, but also seeing how it was growing and also seeing the power of the technology and of the idea behind it. Now, Bitcoin Suisse then established something which you can really summarize, and we use that word quite a lot: pioneering, paving the way, and inviting, let's say, people who are at the fringe of understanding and doubting to have partners on the road to say, okay, I'll go with it, and slowly but surely it builds up. And paving and pioneering really goes together, like when you climb a mountain and the snow hill is still untouched and somebody does the first steps. And I would say, as such, Bitcoin Suisse is really the mountain guide who goes ahead. It comes with certain risks, and the risks are that not every single step you have to do is maybe understood in full clarity in the terrain you also move. And so pioneering means also that you take quite a bit of personal responsibility, and that is something that encourages me at least, that because when you look at Switzerland as a place with what Switzerland has been given by nature, it's actually a damn difficult place to be. So it needs people who have the courage to look beyond the border, to look out and see opportunities. And I would say Bitcoin Suisse is one of the prime examples of Switzerland and innovation, and I think we can be proud of to have it.
And if you think about Bitcoin Suisse in 5 years, or maybe even 10 years, what are services you're probably going to implement in Bitcoin Suisse? Maybe I know about the banking license you tried to get. Will you try to reapply?
Well, there will be a licensed entity within the Bitcoin Suisse universe. That's clear, because without it you cannot hold deposit or trade securities. If a Swiss banking license is the correct thing for Bitcoin Suisse, we are still evaluating. It will certainly be very difficult, because much of what we do fall outside of traditional banking, and thus it takes a very hard effort for us to sit down with the regulators and clarify every field. However, we are also based abroad, and there we are talking licensed entities with others. And here in Switzerland, there's also other licenses framework specifically for dealing with securities. The new DLT license, or the so-called fintech bank. We evaluated all of those, but you will not get a clear answer today. It's something we will announce shortly at our General Assembly, what our strategy is moving forward. As to what products will exist in the future, we cannot even go beyond 1 or 2 years, because we simply don't know. I mean, you had come to me in 2013 in our somewhat smaller office and told me, Niklas, how is Bitcoin Suisse going to look in 2021? I would have had no clue. We are in an evolving technology space, and to make it even more complicated, it's also an evolving regulatory space. So we are standing on moving ground. We can tell you that in the immediate future, what initiatives will come from us. One of them would be our very grand payment solution is finally going to be rolled out to the not only the Swiss but European market, featuring also secondary layer solutions such as Lightning, which is also being integrated here across the platform, but which also has a regulatory aspect. We can't just do everything on ourselves. And then we are dabbling to, or venturing to, looking at much more personal client service, not just the simple onboarding, but also perhaps even venturing close to financial advisory. And then I'll keep a few surprises. What I can say for sure is Bitcoin Suisse in 5 or 10 years will not be like today, because many of the basic services that we provide, now everybody is rushing to provide them, right? That's one thing. And then they are not really high value anymore. And we will probably, and in the end they will probably not even need to be done by a company, but can actually be decentralized themselves. We will evolve, and we have adapted many times, and we are definitely not the company we were 3 years ago, or we were definitely not the company we were 6 years ago, and in the future we will also be different. But we will keep maintaining, having an overview of the crypto space and helping our clients to interact with that.
Maybe staying in the future, I wondered how you guys try to size the opportunity for Bitcoin. So some compare with digital gold or a new monetary system. How do you guys look at it? Maybe starting with Andrej.
The role of Bitcoin in the future compared to, for example, gold. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, one can of course look at Bitcoin itself and its functions. One can look at the functions and the purpose of money, and on the other side also on what's happening in the current environment with inflation rate most likely increasing by the day. National banks printing money. The purpose of money will be challenged of existing, let's say, fiat currencies at least, and the impact of, let's say, decentral currency, which is not really depending on what which is ruled on a governmental basis, for example, or on a central level, will have a quite interesting impact and will probably challenge many different status quos also in the future. Yeah.
I think Bitcoin is certainly on the road to becoming a form of digital gold. It's true Bitcoin has no intrinsic value, but an intrinsic value is not a purpose of a money. None of the great monies have intrinsic values, not the dollar, not the euro, not the Swiss franc. Gold has a very little industrial use, but is mostly also just monetary value. No, the values of money is that it should be durable, right? It shouldn't disappear. That rules out cattle money that you had all over the money. It should be portable. It's a tough one for gold. Gold is not very portable. Only the promises of gold are portable. We went there, but then they broke the promise. Then it should be fungible. 2 units should be alike. And then most importantly, it should be scarce. And on scarcity, I think that the dollar has a big problem. They are talking 2021 assumed inflation rates of 7% or more. That's very tough if you're not a shrewd investor and you have 100,000, somebody stole 7,000 from you this year. You're almost forced to take your money when they arrive and go out and buy something that is serving as a store of value, because the dollar certainly does not. However, Bitcoin fulfills all the 7 properties of money near ideally. Thus, there's only one thing you can say Bitcoin doesn't have, and that's a super long track record. As that track record grows, I am sure Bitcoin will take a stake in what the gold market is. It already has in some sense, right? We have almost $1 trillion market cap, and gold, I think, is $7 trillion. But looking longer, it will also take a much larger stake in all the other stores of value that are out there in the world, from art to diamonds to maybe specifically real estate. Because once you have a store of value that you can actually trust, and Bitcoin, I believe, is exactly that, and which at the same time is liquid, right? It's not really the case with real estate. It can take months to do a deal. And which is transferable. That's certainly not the case for real estate. You can't move the house, right? Then you have something that the world has actually never seen. And I don't know how big that stake will be, but I would assume somewhere between 20 and 60, maybe even $70 trillion. So much bigger than gold. And then you can divide by 21 million, which will be the max of Bitcoin ever, and then you will see somewhere where we will end. But I can't say if it's gonna be in 10 years or if it's only gonna be in 5 years or so forth. But I can tell you that the highest Bitcoin price is in the future and not in the past.
I would agree with most and add maybe a few. That being a chemist myself, I see Bitcoin also as a catalyst above everything. It really transforms the thinking, the current thinking, the paradigms. We lost maybe a little bit with the many years we had the fiat money running so what it's all about. And I think when Bitcoin as idea and technology realization came into play, it was also triggering deep thinking around what value really means and what money means. So catalyst for me is a very, very centerpiece besides all the features, because if you start looking at Bitcoin, it happened to me, it happened to these two gentlemen, it happens to everybody who starts to be open-minded towards the topic, that this is a journey that goes only deeper and deeper and deeper. And I would call that process is a catalytic process that unfolds great ideas. Second feature I would see is not only a catalyst, it's also a referee, because Bitcoin is a statement, it's a program, it's by itself transparent how the rules are, the consensus and all what belongs to it, and as such it's an immutable statement towards maybe very flexible adaptation of other variations of money, fiat for example. So it's always good to have something that made a statement. That doesn't mean though that the technology is not evolving. That's a big error people sometimes think. Look at the recent adoption of Taproot just happened. Will bring major changes.
More signatures.
Yes, and such. But such a referee is always a good thing to look against, because it's easier to value assess something when you have something very dramatically autonomously, almost human independent once it's born and in the air and developed. And gold, there my thought is, of course we human beings always need something to understand. So we love to have proxies, and when you look at the journey of Bitcoin, always referring to the Bitcoin as we know it from back then, 2008 in the paper and 9 from the software inception, that it had variations. It's called the narrative. So once a while it was this, and gold seems to be for the time being the closest thing we know. And then it comes to all that, of course. Yes, gold has many features Bitcoin will never have, because gold is not digital, etc., etc.
But there also goes the other way around, right? Bitcoin will have a lot of features.
And so, though I would say these are the add-ons I start to see, because it's actually it's a master of thinking. It's a philosopher, Bitcoin. It makes you think. And
it's also a pointer to the future, huh?
Yes. So I would go deeper and deeper with the concept, and then not overdo when it comes to fiat against Bitcoin. People normally think about investing, speculation, get rich quick. I think then you completely lose the sight of what it really means. And let's not forget, it's an innovation of human beings. We don't even know who that group person really is. Doesn't really matter at the end. When you learn your Pythagoras, you don't ask who is Pythagoras actually, you just learn the stuff. Same here. So yes, it's also that you can also as human beings say once a while human nature is able to combine things or even recreate things in a very fundamental way. I think we're witnessing one.
And one concern that is often mentioned is the one that you don't have something physical in your hands. You mentioned the transportability with something digital, but also now coming with NFTs, etc. Is it actually a problem that there is nothing physical, or are the future generations going to accept digital art as physical?
I think in some respect they already do. A friend of mine had to dish out 900 francs for a specially rare sword in some computer game to his son. I think it's very possible that 50, 100 years down the line that nobody really cares about the real world. That's all being handled by whatever robots and stuff. It's all about the digital world, and you kind of see tendencies for this already. That let's say esports is now a bigger industry than sports. Maybe that will be the case. So that Bitcoin doesn't have an actual physical representation is of course not entirely true, since it's data, and data can of course be printed out. I mean, if you want a physical representation of Bitcoin, here's one. So you can bring it into being. However, it's quite an advantage that it's data and not a Grundstoff, an element like gold, for example, because it would lose all of its very fantastic features, which is that it's completely interoperable with the internet and with transfers and with so forth, if it was actually a physical element. But it does exist. It does exist as keys, and those keys can also be printed very nicely, as you see on a piece of paper.
There's also another way to size this opportunity, by saying, well, asset managers and investors will at least diversify 5 to 10% of cryptocurrencies into their portfolio as a hedge against inflation, against volatility. What do you think? Is this realistic, or?
It's maybe high, 10%. I wouldn't go there. Right now, of course, Bitcoin is in an adaptation phase. I say Bitcoin a lot. I could say cryptocurrencies, but they're mostly made up, at least market cap wise, by Bitcoin and Ethereum. But once the adaptation phase is over, 15 years from now, then they will actually not generally appreciate very much, except with the growth of the economy. And I think in the future, I mean, short term, 15 years, yeah, it's a pretty good idea to have a large portion of these assets in your portfolio, because they will appreciate, as 11 years of track record also show. But long term, of course, you want probably a higher gain from an asset manager portfolio than the, I don't know, 2 or 3% economic growth a year. I would go maybe with 5%. But then again,
but you have a problem with that, I think. Also, first of all, it's a sign, as you just said, adoption. Other the classical industry starts to talk about asset allocation, 5%, whatever percent, 1%. The little problem I think we have with that is that when you are courageous enough to really put, let's say 5%, it's quite a beast to put 5% in Bitcoin, or let's stick with Bitcoin. If you have done that a few years back, show me the other assets you had, and your 5% quickly will be much more. And then you have a psychodrama to handle more than anything else, because first, discipline in asset management is something that rarely people really can do with themselves. Either you rather delegate or have somebody doing it for you, but doing it yourself is pretty tough for the discipline, selling, buying, adjusting. But what do you do with a beautiful allocation element such as Bitcoin that over time just has seen massive increase? Do you really sell? I tend to see people who don't really sell. I see the hodlers, because once you had that opportunity and appreciated the appreciation, it's really tough, and then it can easily be that you hold more than 5% in your portfolio. That can happen because the others are a bit modest compared. So that's the journey you will go through.
As seen in the past 2 months, Bitcoin has extreme volatility still, which makes, as it is not equal to the traditional equity markets, it can be a tool to diversify and takes out some risks. But still, Bitcoin itself, is there a possibility it will once stagnate at a certain level? How about stablecoins? Are they a risk for Bitcoin, or are they going to elevate adoption?
Oh, they're going to elevate for sure. Stablecoins are a different asset class. It's a more flexible, more integratable form of fiat money, but essentially it's fiat money. Bitcoin is its own asset class completely. And again, when I say Bitcoin, you could say this about a number of blockchains. It's true that Bitcoin has extreme volatility on almost a cyclic basis. It seems to be very connected to every 4 years when the inflation rate is halving. And it usually goes like this. In a short matter of time, the Bitcoin price 10 doubles, and then it retracts about half of that gain. It is always, of course, very dangerous to buy into something when it's on a very vertical growth curve. Even though we want to do it, we want to jump on the train. Sometimes you should let that train go. But normally outside of these major increases and corrections that do not happen that often anymore, Bitcoin is becoming ever more stable. It was not unusual on a daily basis to have 30% ups and downs when we started the company 8 years ago. Today it would be a big move if we see 5 or 7%. That's, whoa, what happened there, right? As the market grows and also as other financial instruments become available for Bitcoin, including, futures, for example, then it will also be tied down. It will be very, very difficult, even if a very big Bitcoin holder makes a big sale or purchase to influence the market. And in itself, that will reduce it somewhat. I also think that a lot of what we see is really connected to these retail hype movements, and they will probably also eventually disappear. And as I said before, I think that long term, when Bitcoin is sitting safely as a part of every asset portfolio or as a part of every pension fund, as a part of every, then the adaptation phase is over, which means that Bitcoin will only grow in value compared to the interest rate. So, money always comes normally with an interest rate, and the growth in the world economy. And then, it will be quite a passive thing to own. Then you can, of course, take your Bitcoin and loan it out, or take your Bitcoin and make investments with it. But then we are back to so it's a closing opportunity. I hope you bought some Bitcoin.
You still can, I think.
So, thank you very much for the conversation, and thank you for taking your time. Does somebody want to add anything to this conversation? Or?
No, thank you as well for taking this opportunity.
I think you should, if some interesting comments come, right, then you can maybe pass them to us, and then we can make a follow-up.
Of course, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good luck to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.